Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Deck Doctor. We're going to be taking a look at another Free Wishes deck, and that is a Day of the Dragons Aurora's Dream Free Wish deck. People just call it Day of the Dragons for short, but as you can see, it has a lot of stuff going on with this list. Last time we covered my Gabrian Wish deck, and the deck pilot wasn't too successful, but I'm proud to announce that Don Pork used that deck and qualified for the monthly. So even though my deck pilot didn't really show the deck's true potential, it managed to be competitive regardless. So anyway, let's move on to the Day of the Dragon deck. This is a very expensive deck to build. It's more of a fun deck. It's not very competitive, even though Modnik managed to get very far with this in a monthly cup. He did say that it was a letdown most of the time. So I wouldn't consider playing this deck as a try-hard deck, when you're trying to climb the ladder. It's better reserved for just when you want a bit of fun. So yeah, you're going to be wanting to get a lot of land down, get a lot of Faeria, and pull off some crazy combos. So let's get into the deck, guys, and let's talk about the creatures to start things off. So the creatures in this deck fulfill a lot of roles. To start things off, we have Spring Mochi, which is going to reduce the cost of our 7 costs by 3. This includes the Primeval Colossus, which you can also see on screen, but also the very important Windfall, which is going to give you the Faeria you need to pull off the Aurora's Dream. Next up, we have Lore Thief. You always need card draw in control decks, and Lore Thief is the best card draw in the game, especially for blue. So auto-include, very easy inclusion as well. Now, Plague Bearer is a card you might not see too often, but seems to find his way in this deck, and it's just to have some more board clears, because you're trying to stall out as long as possible to pull off the Dream, to pull off some crazy combos, and the best way to do that is by wiping the board, or just having big bulky creatures to fight. Speaking of bulky creatures, let's talk about Primeval Colossus. This guy is going to be very easy for you to get down because this deck requires so much coloured land to get things going. So this is going to be one of your primary win conditions, just being able to drop 8 12s down to threaten your opponent, but also a great defensive tool or a great Faeria gathering tool with a card like Feed the Forest. Speaking of Feed the Forest, let's go into the event cards next. So I did say event cards, but there is one card which I've included, which isn't an event, but does find its way into this deck, and that is the Vine Wall, which is a structure which has taunt and the last words create a forest at random. Now the important thing about this card is not only will it stall your opponent, it'll give you some time, but it also creates that additional forest. Now in traditional Free Wish decks, you just need 2 of each most of the time. But with this deck, you do need free forests and free lakes, because you need free forests for your Feed the Forest, but you also need free lakes for your Aurora's Creation. So Vine Wall definitely helps with that as well. Speaking of feed, this is a great way for you to gain Faeria. Primeval Colossus is a great target for this, but you can also use it on Plague Bearer if you need to activate his ability to clear a board. So that's another way you can use Feed the Forest. But again, just a primary Faeria gathering card, since this deck does require a hefty amount. Earthcraft, brilliant card in this deck. Brilliant card in any Free Wish deck, really. And this is going to help accelerate your land, get some card draw. And as I just mentioned, this deck does require a lot of land. Aurora's Creation is part of the wombo combo of this deck. Aurora's Creation, you can copy Colossus for some cheap Colossus, some cheap creatures. You can copy Garudan, which is one of the combos I'll be talking about a bit later for big board wipes. So this card has a lot of flexibility, and I'd recommend playing around with it a little bit and see what you can do with it. And finally, Windfall. As we've said, a lot of Faeria needed for this deck to get going. Windfall's a great card from that, and also has the interaction with Spring Mochi, which we talked about previously. So let's move on to the legendaries of this deck. So no surprise to see Garudan in this list. Garudan tends to feature in a lot of Free Wish decks, but also control decks. One of the best legendaries in the game, which I've said time and time again. But he also has the interesting synergy of Aurora's Creation, which we'll talk about a bit later. Coming up is Day of the Dragons. This is the only deck that has found a way to use this card, and it is great. With Aurora's Dream, you can play like Day of the Dragons off Aurora's Dream for 0, and then you can Windfall for 0, and then you can play one of your dragons. Just keep eye on your hand size. Playing one card to gain 4 can really fill up your hands. You have to be very careful and make sure you play some cards first, because you could lose some dragons when you use this card. Last but not least, we have Aurora's Dream. This is what makes this deck so powerful. If you can get this card off, you can cause absolute chaos. I have a few Day of the Dragons deck videos on the YouTube channel, and I do believe there is one where you see a crazy Aurora's Dream go off. So be sure to look through the video playlist and see if you can find that video. So let's move on to the last card of the deck, which brings not only another win condition, but a way for you to sustain yourself. And there's only one card we could be talking about, and that is the Marmite of Faeria. You either love it or you hate it, and that is 3 wishes. This is just another win condition for this deck, but it also gives that sustain that the deck needs to be able to stall out until it gets off that Aurora's Dream. It also gives you alternate win conditions based on what you steal. And yeah, it's just a great card overall, great for the control decks, and fits very nicely in this super greedy Dragons deck. So let's talk about the mulligan. So the mulligan's pretty simple with this deck. You want to be getting Lore Thieves and Spring Mochis as your primary creatures. These are going to be your Faeria Gatherers, but they're also going to give you that cost reduction, that card draw you need. Just get things going. Plaguebearer is a good keep if you think you're playing a lot of Rush. Plaguebearer is great at killing yellow rush creatures, especially the early one, the haste one, sorry, because they have such low health stats. But it could be a good way to fend off some aggression. Earthcraft, always a great keep in these style of decks because you want to be accelerating land, you want to be drawing cards, and this is the perfect card for this deck. So they're the primary cards you're going to be looking for in your mulligan. So let's talk about land placement. So you want to be keeping your lakes close to your orb because you're going to want to play the Mochis and the Lore Thieves to start collecting immediately. Then you want to be building forests close to your orb as well because you want your Primeval Colossus to be able to defend you if need be. One thing to consider about 3 wishes is also what your opponent is using against you. So you can build land closer to your orb based on your opponent's colors because you're going to be gaining access to those colors and you're going to want to be playing them close to you because you're going to be the defender in most cases with this deck. Of course, you're going to be wanting to get the Garadan spots and the Wind Soldier spots. Garadan spot is pretty much guaranteed. Wind Soldier spot is very much dependent on what your opponent is playing. If they're going to be playing some Yellow Rush, being able to double collect with those Wind Soldiers will be pretty important. It's going to take some getting used to playing this deck and adjusting your lands to your opponents, but I think that's something that comes with playing 3 wish decks. You see what colors they play, and then you build your land based on that information. So let's go into the combo of this deck, which really makes this deck a lot of fun to play. So before we finish things off, let's take a look at this beautiful combo. You can cause absolute chaos with this combo. Garadan will do 3 damage to the whole board. You can Aurora's Creation it, play the next Garadan down, do another 3 damage, and usually that is enough to kill most boards and just completely dominate the game. But sometimes you might squeeze in another creation and just play another Garadan. I've had a situation, which I was talking about earlier in one of my videos, where I managed to quad Garadan with this deck. So it's really fun because you can do some crazy stuff like that. But also, Aurora's Creation synergizes with the other dragons you'll get from Day of the Dragons. So be sure to try out some cool combos with this deck. There is no real budget deck for this because it is a very heavy, expensive control deck. But like I said, it's more of a fun deck, not really that competitive. So that wraps things up for this episode of Deck Doctor. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you enjoyed this deck and have a bit of fun with it on the ladder. Be sure to follow our social medias and our YouTube channel. If you have any questions, by all means, comment. I'll try to get back to you guys. And of course, be sure to check out my stream, GoToTV_Faeria, where I stream Tuesday to Friday. So thank you very much, guys. Take care and enjoy the deck.